So, seen any good moves lately? Welcome back to episode number 12 of the Survivor 49 recap podcast thing. I am your host, Joey Oberding, and today we are joined by the jubilant, charismatic, forever my friend, JFK. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you, Joey. What an intro. Feels good to be here. I'm excited to have
Yes.
been asked to be on the penultimate episode recap.
Yeah, and what an episode you chose to be on because right now, I mean, like in terms of pure things happening and interesting decisions for better or for worse for somebody's game, I mean, there were a lot this past episode. But I mean, you can't have episode 12 without having 11 episodes before it. And so I ask you, what have been your thoughts on the season so far?
I have been, I think, on a roller coaster ride with my thoughts on the season a little bit, for better or worse. And interestingly, because I think at the end of the day, this probably won't be a season that I think has been the most interesting.
Yeah.
I think, it was a little bit of a slow pre-merge, like everyone was saying, and then it seemed like it was picking up steam once the merge hit, and there were advantages hiding out. So we were getting excited, I think, about how those were going to get played and would people use them to improve their spot in the game. And I think in this episode, we found out that no one was
Yeah.
going to use their advantage to improve their spot in the game at all. And it was going to be kind of a bit of a maybe run of the mill finish. And I don't think it's been by any stretch the worst season or there's been some bad gameplay, but there's been some really good gameplay from a couple of
Yeah.
players as well. So I think at the end of the day, I'll probably look back on season 49 as a fine season. And I don't know if this is a little bit of a hot take, but maybe that's the worst spot it ever could have been in. Like not stellar, but not terrible. Just a fine, okay season of Survivor. And when everybody's looking forward to season 50, that was maybe the worst thing that could have ever happened to season 49.
It is pretty incredible in the sense of like just thinking about how I feel. We're one episode out, so I feel like I can start to think about like, okay, what are my real thoughts on the season overall at this point? And I'm like, I don't know, it's probably like middle of the pack for the new era, which is like the most nothing thing to say about a season, especially going into 50. It's like, yeah, it's a new era season, all right. I mean, there's been some unique stuff, there have been unique happenings. Like I'm not saying it's completely forgettable or anything like that. I mean, guy got bitten by a snake, but I mean, it's it's we're in the ninth season of this now, and you can kind of feel that. So there you go.
That's so funny that you say it won't be forgettable because a guy got bitten by a snake, and I completely forgot that had happened this season. It wasn't even on my radar anymore.
Yeah. No, I have been thinking about like Survivor 49 compared to the rest of the new era and like what separates it. And it takes some thinking. I will say this episode did a lot for it though. I think it had a degree of just insanity that we haven't seen that much of in the new era of just like what is happening for better or for worse. A lot of that has to do with Steven's advantage and him playing it before tribal council, and then the knowledge is power coming into play. And it's like, whoa, 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 what is happening? But I think that's interesting. It's interesting gameplay from the very nature of its investing. Like it makes me say what's going on and makes it have stakes. Of course, in this particular case, it didn't end up actually like really mattering. But hey, we got there with like a kickflip, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I was thinking about when Steven got the advantage last week, and the specific wording it was set up in this way that it seemed like it wanted the Survivor gods wanted this exact situation. They put in knowledge is power, and then they tweaked the block of vote to make it immune from knowledge is power, essentially. So there was nothing Sophie was really going to be able to do to take that, which is interesting. But it's also funny that it seems like they're constantly, when they put one thing in, they have to put something else in to be able to counteract the advantage they put in before. So it's funny.
It's crazy too, because like I've been preaching on this podcast for the past few weeks, ever since Soph, also known as Sophie, also known as or Blue Sophie, even, geez, whatever else. I got the knowledge is power. I've been saying, well, knowledge is power is like the most powerful advantage you can have in Survivor, but that's not really true when the advantages just don't apply sometimes. Which is, I think it's just like, I think it makes sense, kind of, because, well, no, actually, I don't think it makes sense. I'll just say I don't think it makes sense. I was trying to justify the decision in my head, but like, there's no reason why a block of vote should have to be played beforehand. I don't think that makes sense. I think it would make way more sense to do it publicly, or if you are a person who has a block of vote, have them go up to the confessional booth first and then say who they're blocking the vote. I think it's fine. Like, you can do it that way too. There's no reason why Steven should sit down and be like, all right, I'm making it official. I'm using this on Savannah. There's no need. No need.
I totally agree. It definitely feels like the only reason that they did that is because they also put knowledge as power in the game, and they wanted the moment of Sophie using the knowledge as power to try to take the advantage, and Steven being able to say, I don't have it anymore, but it's still getting used.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's definitely trying to copy one of the, I guess, more iconic moments of the new era, which is 41, when Liana tries to take Xander's idol and he's like, no, but you can have this fake. Like, I appreciate that. Like, that was a cool moment, and maybe the best moment of 41. So like, it's not the worst thing to try to replicate, but I think by doing it in such a more manufactured way, just by the very nature of it being through a confessional instead of it being through like gameplay, if that makes sense. I think it reminded me a lot more of like Survivor Game Changers, when Sari tries to use Sarah's I think block of vote and can't, because well, you didn't read the whole description. Or well, you can't do that. Of course, that was more just user error in that case, and this one felt more like just like inexplicable rules that don't really make sense. Like, of course you can't. Well, I don't know. Maybe that didn't make sense either. I don't think this made sense, but I think it made for an interesting episode and an interesting gameplay situation. So I'm not even really complaining that much about it. At the end of the day, it's just like I can still scratch the back of my head and be like, well, okay, come on.
I agree. And I think that I'd feel worse about it if I had felt better about Sophie's decision-making process through the rest of the episode. But by the time she was using the advantage, I was already thinking, it was like, okay, well, Sophie's not winning the game anyway. So maybe this is how she goes out. And then she didn't even go out. Steven's allies flipped on him through no fault of the other three doing anything to convince them that it was the right move. So it almost became a footnote in the episode anyway.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's like 3 to 4 people lost the game this episode. Like, they lost their chances of winning. I think the most obvious is Steven, on account of he got voted out, but really it wasn't his fault. Like, he did everything right. And honestly, if karma was, a real factor in Survivor, he would still be in the game, because he deserves to be. He played this round as well as he could. I think Sophie lost the game for obvious reasons that we will get into. And I think Sage lost the game for voting out Steven. And I guess maybe Christina also lost the game, but she probably already did. So maybe she doesn't count. But I mean, that's a lot of people who I think really fumbled the collective bag this episode, and just leaves the scraps for Rizo or Savannah, probably, in my opinion. So I don't know.
I think I agree with you. Definitely Sophie, just picking her side finally and having it be her friends. And can't really say that I blame her, but it's also, she knows it's not a winning decision as well. She's talking about it, so that's fine. Sage's decision is so interesting because she was talking about wanting the final 3 to be her, Sophie, and Christina, and that probably is Sage's only path to potentially winning the game. So I do understand that goal from her perspective, but she's burned so many people flipping back and forth this entire season that would she even be able to pull the votes in that situation? Or is everybody going to be stewing at Ponderosa talking about how mad they are at Sage? And no matter what Jawan says, no one's going to really feel good about voting for her in the end. So who would win? Would it be Christina? Would it potentially be? So I don't think we're going in that final three anyway. That doesn't feel like we're heading in that doomsday scenario. But I do get, I like the thinking from Sage, not just wanting to vote out Sophie, who she thinks, and especially after Sophie's decisions this episode, probably understandably feels like she could beat if she's sitting with her at the end. But the additional backstab to take Steven out puts her in such a difficult position. And then Christina as well. Steven having been her close ally for this entire time, going along with Sage here. If I were on the jury, I feel like my perspective of that would be Christina's not making decisions. She's kind of along for the ride.
I mean, Christina played an idol on Steven so recently, like in game time, like literal days ago. So it's insane to me because, well, why did you do that if you're just going to vote him out next round or one of the next rounds? So that's crazy to me. I think, when I was watching the episode, I was like, okay, Sophie's going to go home after all this. I was like, it's funny because going into the tribal council and really to after the immunity challenge, I was like, all right, there's a 95% chance Steven goes home. But then Sophie just like made this decision to try to steal his advantage, and it didn't work. And it was like, oh, her game is blown up in her face now. And then Rizo says he's not using the idol on her, and I'm like, wow, your goose is cooked. She's gone. And then all the votes for Steven came in, and I was like, what happened? And I'm still kind of grasping with that because I understand that Sage's only path to victory is against Sophie and Christina, probably. But that's also taking into account, like, you got to get there first. Like, that should be what you're concerned about, is being able to pitch your case. If you can pitch your case, you could swing votes and who knows what can happen. But the thing is, she and Christina basically just gave up their voting advantage for convenience sake, I guess. Because now it's like, who's next on the chopping block? It's Sage. And is she going to win an immunity against Savannah? Based on how things have gone so far, I wouldn't necessarily count on it. And that was something that was brought up this episode too, is like Steven's like one of the only people that can beat Savannah theoretically in an immunity challenge. And it's like, well, that's one less person now. So there you go.
Right. Yeah. You never know what's going to happen with those challenges, but certainly Savannah has been a powerhouse at them the entire season, and Steven has had capability. So, I mean, Sage doesn't seem like she's a slouch in the challenges necessarily, but
not at all.
Savannah's so dominant. No one has been able to beat her. And depending on what that final 5 challenge is, it feels like she's going to float through. Skate through, I should say. Float implies that she's not working really hard.
Yeah. But I mean, we're at the point where it's like, part of this, I would say a lot of this, it's easy to focus on the bad gameplay, but there's been a lot of good gameplay too. I think Rizo, especially with his idol, it's like, for a season that's seen so many advantages misplayed, especially recently, it's nice and refreshing to have somebody take a simple hidden immunity idol and prove why it can be like extremely powerful if you just use it the right way. Rizo, I think his theatrics have almost could come back to bite him at the end if it's like you had this idol this whole time and you kept talking about it and you just never used it. But I do think it also, like I said with Sage, it's like it's important to just get to the end and then pitch your case. And I think Rizo seems like he could have a pretty good case if he knows how to pitch it. So I think that's good for him. And him just, I appreciated the fact that he wasn't going to die on the hill of Sophie. And play the idol for her when he didn't have to. Even if that meant risking her going home. Though, of course, I guess it wasn't much of a risk considering it was unanimous on Steven. But from what we knew at the time, it was like, I thought he was being bold and letting his ally die for, for him to keep the idol one more round, which I thought would have been good gameplay. So there you go.
Yeah, I agree. He has been playing with the idol really well. He certainly got kind of lucky early in the merge to end up in a couple of situations where he was able to use it even more effectively, like in the split tribal council that couldn't split the votes on him and Savannah. And Savannah had immunity that round anyway, even if it had been a full tribal council, but they couldn't split on him and Sophie, say. So he was able to use the threat of the idol to prevent votes from coming on him at all. And played that really well. Disrupted, got himself, and also with Savannah, I think they both played really well in those rounds after being blindsided at the merge boot. Getting themselves back into a position of power and then not having to use the idol, even though people wanted him to. I think the lines in the sand have been drawn elsewhere, so he was able to build allies and hang on to his idol until now, when it became super powerful again because no one wants to go after him. One thing I do not understand is how anybody believed his lie about the idol expiring. Like, the idols don't expire at Final Six. They never have they? Has any idol ever expired at Final Six except for like the legacy advantage, which is only good at Final Six?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this is like the other side of the Tony lie in Kagayan, right? Of like, yeah, my super idol goes an extra round because it's super. I guess this is just an extension of that. And honestly, I think that like part of my assumption is that I think some of the contestants, when it comes to Rizo, are just like, for better or for worse, are just like, okay, whatever you say, man. Because this guy's been saying whatever about the idol for weeks now, I think, or at least a week on the island. I think it's definitely a boy pride wolf situation, and you could see it on the face of the jurors too when he was talking about it. They were a little like, this guy again with the idol. That's all he talks about, and he doesn't do anything with it. So that's all to say that we will see how it works out for him at the end. I'm a little dubious, even though I think he's played a great game. I'm a little dubious how the jurors will react to him at Final Tribal Council if he's had this idol this whole time and just never has to use it. I think sometimes that can be a detriment to somebody's game if you have an advantage and you never openly use it, even though I think he's used his idol as best as a player really can in the game. So I don't know.
I agree. I do think it's a little bit different than the Xander situation where Xander was kind of sitting on the idol. Rizzo's been wielding the idol and using it to get himself through and to build alliances with the power of it as sort of the threat. But he is also, like you said, he says a lot of things. He's talking a lot, and you can tell at Tribal Council, it feels like he's already trying to put stats out there.
That's true.
He said at one point in the Tribal this episode that he's gone 7 Tribal Councils without having to use the idol, even though people know about it. And it feels almost like, and not to be the person who's going to use an analogy to talk about Survivor, but I'm about to use an analogy to talk about Survivor. Yeah. The Olympics are coming up. A couple of years back, probably a while back at this point, the Olympic gymnastics scoring changed in such a way where it went from like gut feeling of the judges, and they were giving out a range from 1 to 10 to this much more mathematical based addition of points based on the specific things that you're doing in whatever routine you've got. So you're like compiling points and compiling points. And it feels like that's the approach Rizzo is taking to Survivor. And he's trying to drop these things in Tribal Council for the jury to hear, and they're going to give him points along the way. And then at the end, they're going to give him the votes because he's scored the most technique points with what he's doing with all of these advantages. But that's not how Survivor is won. Survivor is won on the feeling of the jurors. And I got a little bit of the sense this episode that between the fake idol play last round, the things he's seeing in Tribal Council, standing up only to not play his idol this round, even though probably the right decision, because why not hang on to your idol to get yourself through Final 5 and into Final 4 and take a shot at fire. Seems like the jury was sort of a little bit sick of it, but happy with the outcome. I think predominantly happy with the outcome of the episode, which makes me feel like this is probably Savannah's game to lose.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Just to speak on like the point system, because that's a very real thing. I think if there's one thing that's been proven through the new era, it's exactly what you said, is that Survivor is a lot more vibes dependent at the end of the day of who wins, and certainly more based on the social game and not necessarily through big moves or through theatrics, which I felt like it may have been a little more of throughout the 30s. But ever since Erica won at 41, I think it's been, for the most part, very much just who has the best social game at the end, or who was the actual biggest threat throughout the game. Um, Sometimes it's a little hazy. Sometimes it's a little different. But like the reason why Rachel wins is because they have a good social game and they're the biggest threat the whole time. Or the reason why somebody like Gabler wins is because Cassidy wasn't really taken seriously, or whatever else. But the reason why Kenzie beats Charlie is because Kenzie was just more well liked.
Fire in your eyes.
Yeah, fire in your eyes, exactly. Something Charlie did not have. That's a plus. That's the ultimate point that you can get in the Survivor Olympics. But anyways, that's all to say that at the end of the day, like if you really want to divvy up through what's won people the game throughout the new era, the biggest score would probably go to Savannah, because she's been the person people wanted out for the entire game, and yet she's still here. You know, she doesn't. I don't think she has the innate likability factor that some other winners have had. But I think at the end of the day, that almost doesn't matter when everybody on the jury tried to get her out at one point or another, and everybody failed. So I don't know.
I agree. And it's interesting. She's obviously been racking up the immunity wins, but how many of the times she won immunity do you think she needed to win immunity in order to survive? Or would she have survived anyway? Because certainly the first one, where she won and then was able to go to the split tribal council, she was in dire straits there. And then maybe the next one as well. I'm having a little bit of trouble remembering, but
yeah,
at a certain point, she wasn't really. They were in again once they got through that rough spot. And who knows? Rizo might have played the idol on her, and then maybe we'd be talking about Rizo as the biggest threat if she had survived due to the grace of Rizo's idol. And who knows where we'd be right now if that was the case. But it's not. She's winning these immunities, and I think along the way, maybe I'm misreading, but it sort of felt in this episode like the through line that we'd had about Savannah not being well liked was maybe overblown, or had maybe the story had changed. Last episode, the tribal council moment between her and Christina seemed like it was probably a little bit staged. That wasn't necessarily true. People are still talking about her as the biggest threat, but they can't vote for her because she has immunity. So I think she's respected. It seemed from the jury this episode, like I'd say at least Yellow Sophie seems like a pretty big Savannah fan.
That's true.
Nate is definitely a big Savannah fan. And I think Alex seemed like he was pretty happy with the result of this episode as well, but was rolling his eyes at Rizo. So my guess is he's a pretty big Savannah fan on the jury too. So I agree. I think that she's running away with this thing right now. And unless something bad happens to her in one of the next two challenges, I think she's probably our winner of 49.
Yeah, it's leaning that way for sure. And I think part of that is because she has won immunities at clutch times. I think when you're somebody that is a target and just continually survives, I think that is it rises your threat level more than playing an idle right or using an advantage well, is if people wanted you out and they failed, and they don't hate you, which I don't think anybody hates Savannah, for the record. I think that that's, the path to victory. Of course, the only exception of hate is if you're like Russell Hantz or something like that, but Savannah certainly isn't that. So I think she's in a good spot, but it also makes me think about like the edit and sort of what we've gotten from these contestants, because we're at the end of the game, so we can see who matters and who doesn't. It's interesting because from my perspective, it's like we had this trio that was kind of on the bottom at the start of the merge. So Savannah, Rizo, who have managed to crawl their way back out of the bottom and are now in pole position, controlling the game. And, theoretically, that sounds like a great narrative, but I feel like I personally haven't been like surprised or anything like that this whole season. Maybe it's just because, I've been through 49 of these seasons, whatever. It ain't nothing to me. But like it's interesting because I didn't feel that shocked seeing Soph be able to get up from the bottom, being the last person on her tribe, or Rizo with this idol managed to avoid going home. It just didn't really shock me that much, and I don't really know why necessarily, beyond I've seen a lot of seasons of Survivor.
I was thinking about that as you were starting to say it too. It was kind of hitting me as well that it feels like an underdog narrative when you just say it out loud, but it really hasn't played out that way on screen. They felt very much like the favorites the entire time. And I wonder if that's because, unlike, say, Tocantins, where there were only 3 people left from the tribe who go into the merge as the complete underdogs, in theory, and then work themselves into a better position because there was so much dissension in the opposition. This group came in seeming like the favorites going into the merge with the numbers on their side, and then were quickly blindsided, and then just as quickly had a couple of breaks go their way and were able to work themselves back into a good position. Really impressively. I think it's been really strong gameplay on their part. But they didn't spend that long on the bottom. So it probably just hasn't felt like in the course of the season that this is really like we're really watching a true underdog story, even though we probably kind of are.
Yeah, I think just thinking about it as well, the difference between this and, say, Tocantins obviously has to do with the tribe format. There being 3 tribes and, hey, 2 swaps this season, I think also makes it a lot more fluid in terms of, who's actually working with who. And so when you have a clear voting block to us, the audience of 3, with Soph, Rizo, and Savannah, and then everybody else is kind of a mishmash of confusion. And it's like, okay, I know Sage and Jawan are working together. Steven and Christina are working together. And then everybody else is kind of like a question mark. Like, I don't really know where Sophie with an E stands, and she's kind of flip-floppy, and who knows. And I think that makes it a lot easier to see the strong duos or the strong trios and be like, okay, that's something I can latch onto as a viewer and be like, okay, that's real, versus, say Sophie with an E's gameplay, which I was never like, oh, okay, she's going to be in a power position and she's going to, do something in this game, So maybe that's just me, once again, having seen a lot of seasons of Survivor, but that's a theory as to maybe why it felt that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are the advantages? Yeah.
The advantages, definitely. I think you're right. It kind of gives credence to the idea that the group at the end is going to be the tightest, largest group. And in this season, that's been the group of 3 of Savannah, Sophie, Blue Sophie, and Rizo. And the other groups that have come together have been a bit disjointed and moving around. It's been a bit more of a voting block situation, especially after Sophie got, I guess, the information that she got out of the split tribal and the reaction after she came back from that. And it was a good read, but it's also probably what they want when they have the split tribal council to begin with, is to force the lines to be shown a little bit more and make the gameplay more fluid. Because if that hadn't been a split tribal council, this probably still ends up being a bit more of a runaway the other way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I honestly never really considered that about the split tribal council, as it shows off tribal lines very well. Because I think that's true. I just think most of the time, like like tribal lines shouldn't really matter when it's a group of three, because usually there's not one tribe that's super in pole position going into the merge. But in this case, that was kind of the case where sure, Uli and Hina had like even numbers, but Jawan and Sage had long since flipped. And so it was basically just the four of Rizo, Savannah, and Nate. And I guess Soph, if you want to count her. But yeah, it was really just those three, maybe four, and then everybody else is sort of on a side against them. And then Nate went home, and since then, I think they kind of infighted with each other a little bit, partially because of Sophie realizing that she was on the bottom, but also because Savannah kept winning immunities, so the target kept shifting off of their group at the bottom. So there you go.
Yeah. It's also the inability to, or unwillingness to take a shot at Rizo. I've kind of been thinking for a while that we've seen it in seasons, the person with the idol, no one wants to go after them. But at some point, much earlier than right now, it really feels like everybody else has to come together and say, listen, we have to take the risk here that he'll use the idol and go after him. And one of us might go home, but we're all fighting with each other around this guy. And he's going to walk away to the final three if we don't force this idol out of his hands. So we've all got to come together and vote together and not do what they tried to do in the split tribal council. Just throw a vote. Well, I'll just throw a vote over here and then we'll go talk about it. And then we'll all start fighting again. And then no one's going to vote for him. We've all just got to vote for him and force him to sit or play the idol, but get it out of his hands so that we have another target on the board.
Yeah. No, I mean, like with fire making too, it's like somebody said episodes ago something interesting at tribal council, which I've been thinking about, which is like it's not the worst thing to have somebody has an idol, because it's better to have an enemy in terms of where the idol stands than to have a question mark of where the idol is if it gets rehitten. And I think that's interesting, and I think there's merit to that. I just also think in the case of Rizo having an idol, like if you're not going to go after him ever, he's guaranteed to take up one of the spots at Final Four. Like, you are conceding that. And if you don't think he's a threat to win, great. That's not the worst thing in the world at all. Like, if you think he's a Xander, then sure, go ahead. But I think, as you said before, I don't think he's quite to that level of, incompetency at all. I think he's played a very good game. Now, the question is, of course, does the jury recognize that? Do they even care, or are they just over the theatrics? Who's to say? I can't speak to that. We'll learn next episode. But I think that it's more likely to me that I think that Rizo, he's played his idol as well as he can, but part of it is also just the inability to take a shot from some of these people. I mean, he keeps saying he's going to play his idol, but that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything. Like, if anything, that's more indicative that he's not going to play the idol if he keeps saying he's going to do it. He's all bark and no bite.
Definitely. And even more so than the situation with like Xander was at least seemingly, it's been a while. I don't have a great memory of season 41, but more fluid of a player. Like, didn't have a tight number one.
That's true.
Was kind of there, so no one really took him as a threat. Rizo is part of this tight three and tight two with Savannah, who's winning all of the individual immunities and is probably the biggest threat to win the game. It's created such a tight voting block that the rest of the tribe can't penetrate, that it makes the need to take a shot at Rizo and at least get the idol out of the game much more dire than it is with someone else who's even if you don't think Rizo can win the game, no matter who he's sitting next to, him being there with Savannah and Sophie is preventing everybody else from having a shot. It's created such a bottleneck in positioning that they really needed to do something before right now, but they didn't. They had opportunities.
This is going to be something that I think we're going to see a big shift on come 50, because this is now 2 seasons in a row where the people who are most likely going to be at the end and filling up the seats of Final Tribal Council are the most obvious duos and trios in the game. Last season, I mean, say what you will about how secret Kyle and Camilla's relationship was, but if nothing else, Joe and Eva's relationship was extremely public and people knew about it. Everybody knew about it since before the pre-merge, and also Eva had a public idol. And in this season, it's everybody knows that Rizo and Savannah are number 1s and 2s, and he has a public idol. And Soph is also the 3 there, and everybody knows that she's the 3rd person there. So I think come 50, I think hopefully it's going to be almost like a season 46 level of let's just get out who has an idol. And if nothing else, there will be more fights between these duos and trios instead of just like being like, you have fun. We're dealing with our own stuff over here, which is what it's kind of felt like for the past 2 seasons in that regard. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but season 46, in addition to being the get rid of everybody who has an idol, wasn't that also everybody was trying to get rid of their own ally? Everybody was trying to get rid of their number 1, and now it's flipped in the other direction, and people saw that and were like, why am I getting rid of my best ally? And now people are actually hanging on to they're working really closely together. We're seeing these really tight protons at the core of the nucleus who are locked in, and it's worked really well for a few of them who are able to maintain that level of trust. It's a tried and true way to play the game. And, has it been uninteresting? I think it's been pretty interesting, even though I don't think season 49 is going to go down as one of my top half seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's been interesting to watch how this tight crew has held on to trust, and when it looked like they could just easily break at the merge and go in opposite directions, they held on together and did what they could to get themselves back into this position in a really good way. Strong way.
And to speak on Tres Leches or whatever their name is, I think that that has been great for everybody in that trio up until this episode. I think it has worked out for them extremely well. I think going into this episode, all 3 had extreme win equity to the point where it felt like they were, to me, the only viable candidates. Maybe Steven, but that would be a stretch. You'd have to kind of win out. But I think, Savannah, I think, is, as we talked about, still in pole position. I think Rizo is still in a good spot as well. I mean, all it takes is Savannah going home. All it takes is her losing the immunity challenge and Rizo being like, well, now's our time. And Soph was doing well. I just think that the biggest problem that she had this episode wasn't even necessarily sticking with the 3. I think you could easily make an argument that was the right thing for her, because that will likely get her to Final Tribal Council, or at least gets her an additional round. She's with the numbers. She's in a good spot theoretically. I think the biggest problem is that she didn't do anything to diversify herself from the other 2 people that she's working with, when she could have, when she had the perfect advantage to do that, instead of taking Rizo's idol or holding on to it, as I've been saying for weeks now, to do a Marianne thing at Final Tribal Council and just say, I had this the whole time. Aren't I awesome? She kind of went for both the most obvious thing to do with it, and also the thing that helps everybody else and not really her. She doesn't benefit from Steven getting his vote blocked, but I'll tell you who does. Everybody else, because they get another episode, and they get to benefit from Sophie misplaying her advantage, basically, by having her win equity go down while theirs stays stagnant. So, or at least theoretically stays stagnant. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the person who benefited the most from the way Sophie played her advantage was Rizzo, because if she goes the other direction, she takes Rizzo's idol to make sure she's protected. Rizzo goes home because now all of a sudden Rizzo's idol is in Sophie's hands, and everybody else knows that. So
Mhm.
Savannah has her vote blocked already. The other three, I'm sure, come together. I guess I shouldn't say I'm sure, because I was surprised by the way that they made their decisions this episode anyway. But there's at least a chance that Steven, Sage, Christina all look at each other and go, "Whoa, he's open. Take the shot."
Yeah.
And he goes home. And is that good for? That's probably a good move for Sophie as well, because she's not going to win in the end here, and she's the one who opened that up. So now all of a sudden the tight duo is only Savannah, and maybe Savannah wins out immunity wise anyway, but at least Sophie has this other move to differentiate herself from the other three, like you said, because she only turned inward and locked in with them. And then she ended up playing the advantage incorrectly anyway, which had the it had the even worse than just playing the advantage incorrectly. You played the advantage incorrectly when you didn't even need to play it to begin with,
Yeah.
showing the jury that you did not know what was happening with the votes this time. And I don't think Savannah or Rizzo knew either. Savannah, there was a great shot of Savannah at the end where she was just like, "What happened here?" Because Sage and Christina, I guess, just didn't say anything. It was just, a cluster of a vote in a way that is interesting to describe a unanimous vote that way. But it's a tough spot to show the jury at this stage in the game that you don't actually know which way the votes are going. You don't realize that you're safe. You did nothing to keep yourself safe, is what it says, which is a bad thing to be showing the jury at the final six.
It's very true. And I also think that I saw something online where Soph was responding to people being like, "Hey, what was up with that?" And I think she said something to the effects of like, "Well, I had to play it and I wasn't going to take Riz's idol, so my only option was Steven," which I think is backing yourself into a corner for no reason on multiple fronts. Once again, you didn't have to play it at all. Like there's no reason. And plus, I've been saying that, all right, it's a good idea to hold on to this for as long as possible. Nobody knows about it. Like it's good. You can play under the radar and then strike when the iron's hot. But if you're Soph and you were never going to take Ariza's idol to begin with, and Christina had this public idol, why wouldn't you have taken that episodes prior if you knew about it and weren't going to take Riz's idol? Like that's the thing that confuses me about it. I'm sure that she has her reasons, and maybe that goes back to people just don't see Rizzo as big of a threat as it feels like he should be. But I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's such weird gameplay to me. Soph had weird gameplay this episode, and it was bad gameplay.
Was she saying that she was never, like, at any point in the game thinking about taking Rizzo's idol, or at
Yeah, I
this
think.
point specifically?
Yeah, I think it might have been a at this point specifically sort of thing, but that still doesn't really stop my overall point, which
No.
is, if you were at final like 7 or final 8 and you were like, well, if we get to the end of the game, I don't want to have to take Rizzo's idol. You don't, then use it some other way. She theoretically should have known that this is going to be a unanimous vote against Steven. And even if she didn't, like, even if getting rid of Steven is the one vote, blocking his vote is the one thing that keeps you in this game and keeps you moving forward in this game, once again, that's still helping other people out more than yourself, probably. That's still helping out Rizzo more. That's still helping out, arguably, even Savannah more, even though she was immune anyway. But taking Rizzo's idol, or once again pocketing it and doing a Marianne thing, that benefits only yourself and is going to be actually surprising to the jury. The thing that was surprising to the jury is that there was a knowledge is power at all, which should have been private information for the entire episode, and nobody should have known that. But Soph spilled the beans on that too, which don't get me started on that. But it's just I really just think she fumbled it. I think she fumbled it so hard, and it's such a bummer.
I agree. I think the way that I felt watching it was that we had built up Sophie as a potential alternative within the three. If it's not going to be
Yes.
Savannah or Rizzo, Sophie could come in over the top with this knowledge is power and do something to vault herself to the top of the pack. And I think we created a threat where maybe none really existed.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I know from my perspective, like I've been rooting for her. She's been my not my winner pick, but the person who I've rooted for the hardest for the majority of the merge. And so it was like we were all rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. How could you do this to us, sort of thing. But no, since we're talking about Soph, I let me just go through the whole timeline because her biggest mistake is honestly, we've been burying the lead. The biggest mistake she made was not using the knowledge as power on Steven. The biggest mistake she made, in my opinion, was telling Rizzo to his face, "I've had a knowledge as power for a long time, but hey, I'm not going to use it on you." It's crazy. It was insane to me that she had it for so long, and it was like, great, you know not to tell anybody about your knowledge is power, and then she gets some guacamole in her and she's spilling the beans. It's crazy to me.
I mean, who hasn't said things they shouldn't after a couple of bowls of guacamole?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I agree. She kept it to herself for so long. She sounded really great in confessionals, talking about how she might use it. And even afterwards saying maybe the smart thing to do is just take Rizzo's idol and make sure I'm safe going into next round. I don't know Rizzo. I don't owe him anything. But yeah. I can't say it seems very easy to say I would have no attachment to the people if I were playing that game and I would be making these obvious decisions, but it must be hard feeling like more recently, I felt a bit sympathetic to the third place finishers who are going along without seemingly the ability to make a move, but it is very hard, I think, to take yourself out of a final three losing situation and put yourself into a new winning situation, going with people that you haven't been working with and haven't built trust with, and thinking you'll have been able to build that trust or trust them to vote with you through the rest of the game when you don't have that experience going in. It seems like everybody watching says, you have to make a move, you have to make a move. But to look over to the other side and go, I don't trust any of them and they don't trust me. How can I just do that? Versus I like these people and I enjoy spending time with them and we've been working together and at least I'll get third place money. It's hard. I think it's a lot harder than people give them credit for. And they take a lot of flack.
That is very fair. And I think that when you look throughout some of the third place finishers, even recently, you can see that where it's either people who have sort of been on the bottom and never got their foothold, whether it be an Owen or a Jake or a Xander or whatever else, or somebody who just had their bet and laid in it, for better or for worse. I think that you're right that third place finishers are still people who finish third out of 60 or out of 18 people. So it's like they obviously are good at the game in their own ways. I think the reason why I can't get over the soap thing is because it's true that she has an attachment to Rizzo and Savannah that she doesn't have with Christina or Steven or whoever else. And I'm not faulting her for any of that. It just is the question of like, you have power that Owen and Jake never had. You have the power to change the game to whatever degree you want to. You know where the advantages lie. You know about all that stuff, and you know where people stand theoretically. She's been in the middle of the entire merge, basically. Like, sure, she's in this 3, but she's the one kind of communicating between the two sides. She's the person in the middle of these numbers theoretically. So she could go any way, and she has a knowledge as power. She is, once again, theoretically, the most powerful advantage in the game. So many different ways to go through it, but then it goes to what you're saying, where it's like it does not feel like she's playing for first. It feels like she's playing for second or third, and it's like I don't know what to tell you, because in confessional she says that she's playing for first, but the gameplay just doesn't have me agreeing with that. It contradicts the evidence presented in front of me. So I don't know.
Can I ask you a question about Rizo as it relates to
Please.
the decision that Sophie didn't make? And thinking about an alternative timeline where Sophie makes the choice to take Rizzo's idol, and say Rizo goes home there as a result. Now he's exposed, and the other three see blood in the water, and they chomp. We were talking about Rizo as somewhat game body in his approach to trying to win the game and rack up points.
For sure.
But we've also seen him very emotional. Do you think Rizo would give Sophie credit there, or would he come in very upset about, so would he feel betrayed and give into that hurt and not give Sophie the credit to give her the vote at the end, even though that at this point would probably be the move of the season if she held on to the secret of knowledge's power, used it against him, probably doesn't even have to play the idol.
Yeah.
And Rizo goes home, and then she uses the idol next round and ends up in the final three. That is such a baller move. It didn't happen. Would she get credit for it? Or would Rizo just be pissed at her?
I'll say this. It's a great question. And for Rizo specifically, if he's on the jury, I think his order of who he's going to vote for is the same, regardless of if that happens or if he just gets, loses in fire making or whatever, which is he's voting for Savannah no matter what. And then I think Soph is second place. But I think it's for different reasons that Soph would be second place. If he just goes out through fire making, it's she is my closest ally. If it's, the idol shenanigans and the knowledge is power, it's Savannah's my number one and I want to see her win. And then I guess I got to give credit to Sophie. Like, I could actually see a world where if Steven was still in the game in that regard and he makes the end, he would vote for Steven ahead of Soph in that situation. But it's hard to say. The thing that I know about Steven is about Rizo is he plays orgs and he plays online Survivor. So that tells me, as somebody who once played those games and doesn't anymore because I value my time. People on the jury in those usually are pretty respectful of the best gameplay. There are certainly exceptions, but judging by how game body Rizo has been, I assume that he's in the former camp of like a guy who respects the moves, especially as a guy who's been doing a lot of moves himself. I mean, that would be super hypocritical of him if he were like, how dare you do theatrics about my public idol, when he was the guy who stepped up after blindsiding Jawan and was like, dap me up, bro. Like, it's just, it would be a little hypocritical. So I think
I love a hypocritical juror, though.
I would love that.
Wouldn't be the first.
Would not be the first at all. Yeah, but I don't know. That's my perspective. That's all to say to speak on Rizo a little more. Soph made the worst decisions this episode. Well, maybe the second worst, depending on how you feel about Sage. But Rizo's up there because he gets told by Soph, hey, I have this knowledge, this power. Don't worry, though. I'm not going to use it on you. Trust. And Rizo still kept the idol. He kept the idol when I think he could have easily had just given it to Savannah. And there would be no threat of the knowledge's power being used against him, and this whole conversation would be null. But the fact that he didn't do that, which is a risk, obviously, but it's a risk with your number one ally, makes it so we can have this conversation about, well, why didn't Soph take Rizo's idol? So there you go.
It's true. I guess you give him some credit for the read, but it certainly would be a preventative measure, but maybe he's just thinking at the point where Sophie is telling me that the knowledge is power exists, that level of trust was enough for him. But we saw him put trust into people that he shouldn't throughout the course of the season. And at the start of the jury, he was so sure that Juwan and Sage were working with him. So he's had off reads before, but this time he was right about it. But
yeah. No, it is interesting though. Just thinking about the whole thing where we're talking about, Sophie doing more to get herself in a better position, or Rizo doing something to get himself in a better position. But despite all that, there's still that there wouldn't be decisions to put them as front runners. No matter how good Soph's move could be, she'd still be basically hoping Savannah loses fire making or gets voted out next episode. Because regardless of gameplay, it feels like, and I could be wrong, people could love Rizo, people could love Soph, people could love Christina for all we know. But it feels like if Savannah's at the end, she is the favorite to win. And it would have to take a really good jury speech to convince people otherwise. So, I don't know.
I agree, especially because I don't think that anyone's missing Rizzo's game. I think it feels like Savannah is the favorite to win, but Rizo doesn't have anything new to tell the jury because he's been so forthright about what he's doing and dropping things at tribal council to make sure that people are aware. But it still does feel like Savannah is the one we're still being presented with as the biggest threat. That no one can take a shot at. So I'm not sure what he could say to pull the votes over her, let alone anybody else. Like, certainly can't see Sage, Christina, or Sophie being able to do anything to say that they deserve the win over her.
That's a really interesting point you just made about Rizzo's been telling everybody about his gameplay already, while Savannah, I don't think really has had to the same extent, which makes me wonder, do you have to have something new to tell the jury at final tribal council, or
not if you're the favorite?
I guess not if you're the favorite. I'm just thinking, because in recent Survivor history, there have been so many more, surprises at the end. 42 is going on behind me. Marianne's the biggest example, but I mean, even in terms of, you look at last season and Joe got third partially because he just everybody knew his gameplay, or lack thereof, which is be loyal, win immunity challenges, maybe do a little bit of hypocriteness along the way. And that was Joe's gameplay, and everybody knew that. While Eva and Kyle, if nothing else, could be like, hey, in Kyle's case, I had the secret duo, you didn't know about that. And in both their cases, be like, hey, also, I was a hidden profession, which, it's something I've learned this season is it's really easy to, give that a lot of why would you ever lie about being a former reporter, or being, a lawyer, or, saying that you're a teacher when you're not, or whatever else. But you get to the end and it's that works. it works. So
I get the lie about the reporter is the most wild, I think, profession that we've heard be lied about. What is the advantage there? I mean, she's very eloquent and she gives very good confessionals for sure. But is it really giving her some skill that she has to hide from the rest of the tribe? Otherwise, she's a massive threat. I think the stats on lawyers I've heard at some point is actually legit. That they end up doing pretty well. And also there's the idea that they're going to do well. So I understand it a little bit more from that perspective, but I don't have any idea why Savannah was lying about her job. But
former job, not even current
former job, right? The comparison to Joe and Kyle's definitely interesting. Joe, the figurehead, seemingly in an older Survivor season, maybe the favorite going into tribal council, but Kyle had so much more gameplay that Joe was just unaware of, that they weren't each other's type duo, even though they were very close allies. Savannah and Rizo don't have gameplay that the other one isn't aware of. they've been working together.
That's true.
The entire time, and for each other. So even though Rizo has been more forthright and forward and the one with the idol, Savannah was just as much a part of the decision-making process. And like Savannah coming in the split tribal council episode with the information that the rest of the tribe was expecting and possibly wanted Yellow Sophie to be the one who ended up going home, was able to put Rizo on the path to use the idol to push the vote on to MC. So I think that even as Rizo is saying those things, and I think people see that, I don't think anyone is surprised will be surprised to hear that.
Not at this point.
No. Part of that. So it will be tough for either one of them to differentiate, and then one of them wins. And I think that they are just looking at Savannah as more of the leader of the duo.
Yeah. I think this is all to say that nobody this season has that 48ness to them of like being able to give some secret, I guess, other than Savannah, if you think that's going to be a big deal, but I don't really think so. So that's to say that going into the end of the game and going into final tribal council, unless something crazy happens during fire making, which is always possible, people will help themselves out that way. It feels like it's going to be kind of the status quo of who is the biggest threat. And once again, it's going to have to take a very good jury speech to explain somebody's gameplay that maybe we couldn't have seen through anything except confessionals to overtake a Savannah or a Rizo, which, I mean, it's fine. It's just like, I don't see anything that Sage says, moving the needle in that way, or certainly anything Christina says. And at this point, now that Soph got rid of her advantage, I don't really see that for her either. So it's, look, there is a world where the final three is Soph, Christina, and Sage. And if it is, it's interesting. It's fascinating. That'd be great. But I don't see that happening. So there you go.
Yeah, I think it would be unlikely at this point, just because Savannah's been such a beast at the challenges that it seems pretty impossible for that to be what happens. But I just going back to the Savannah Rizo of it all, maybe we should talk about one of the other situations just in case this isn't what we end up doing.
This is the season.
I wonder if Savannah will even get a little, if the differentiator from the jury's perspective will be less about gameplay and more about social game. And will Savannah get like a "we misjudged you" bump from everybody? Because there was talk about people not vibing with Savannah, not liking Savannah, not wanting to work with. Sage has been very anti-Savannah over some courses of the season. I think that Christina, there was truth to what she was saying last episode at some point along the way, but maybe not so much anymore. Sophie and Savannah have been working together, but also not working together at other points in the season. So will there be a case of people had thought of her one way, and then when they actually started working with her and getting to know her, oh, now they actually like her. Now they're at the end and she's everybody's friend and they feel really good about voting for her. And it'll be this uplifting story. And I mean that like genuinely, sincerely, like an uplifting, oh, she has this thing in her past. It was a very difficult situation, and then she got in here and, was doing well at the start and then kind of took a hit and really was getting down on herself and feeling a bit like she was hearing things that she had heard in her past as well. But now it'll come all back around. And actually this crew does love her and she gets all these votes and she wins in the end. And it'll be great. Is that the story that we're seeing where this ends? And that's why she ends up getting the votes, even though Rizo might have more of the technique points.
Well, I'll tell you this much. If that does end up happening and she does end up winning, that's the narrative that Jeff's going to tell us. So there's that. But no, I think honestly, like, I don't know how close this cast is like outside the game, because I haven't really paid that much attention to it, because sometimes I can give things away inadvertently. So I've been trying to avoid like social media for the players who are still on. But I mean, I don't think this cast is that tight. I think it's much more of like, I think it would be leaning more towards a begrudging victory of like, you outlasted. Like, we wanted to get you out. Like I said at the start of the podcast, like, we wanted to get you out, but it's like we couldn't. So props to you. And plus, the alternative is Rizzo, who was right there the whole time. It's not like the alternative is somebody who was, oh, I'm MC and Rizzo was on my side in this game, and we worked together. And shouts out to him. It didn't work out for me, but I can live vicariously through this guy winning $1 million. It's either that or you give it to Sage, who has flip flopped on everybody. It feels like, or you give it to Christina, who, quite frankly, has not done anything. So I think, honestly, whoever wins, it will be begrudging, whether it be Savannah or Rizzo, or at this point probably Soap as well. Of just like, there's no other options, and maybe that speaks to, it was a good move for everybody to get rid of Steven, because they might not have had a shot against him because he was the alternative to the status quo. But I think it just creates a new status quo, which is Savannah's going to win if she gets there. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Even Steven, it looked like the jury was kind of over when he had his whatever it was that he's. I don't even remember what the analogy was, but the jury just
Stupid.
falling out of their chairs. Their eyes were rolling so far into the back of their heads. It was a rough look for him. So
Yeah,
I saw that and it was like, oh, I thought he was like the underdog favorite from their side of things, but not so much.
I think 9 seasons in the new era now. I think every season has to have the kind of annoying nerd, and not to say that Steven's annoying. He seems very nice, but his analogies are. And I think Shaheen was kind of the same way last season.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a nice guy. Analogies are a little much. He danced for chicken and waffles. We don't like that. Things like that. Season 44 is, of course, the Revenge of the Nerds with Kane and Matt and Carson. Like, this is something we get a lot of. And I think part of it is like, you see the roams of it all, and Jeff feeds into that. He likes it when you get airtime if you make stupid analogies, and you kind of pine for the camera. Even in Steven's exit confessional, he was doing like a rocket ship puns and stuff like that. He was like, I thought we were sailing, but it was I don't know. I don't know rocket ships. I haven't been in one, so whatever.
It's so funny. My internet flickered as I was watching and timed out and came back into the Amazing Race right as the preview for next week and the exit confessional were going, and I was like, I thought, oh my god. So I went through the effort of like pulling up the episode and flashing all the way back through to that point, only to see that and was like, oh my god, that was such a waste of time. I can't believe I went through this effort to see him talking about rocket ships or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's all to say that Steven, I think, was probably respected for him being the alternative to the people that were working with Savannah and Rizzo as an alternative to winning. But I think it was more as the alternative than it was like, hey, this guy's awesome. He's had great gameplay, which, I mean, he had the best gameplay of anybody from Hina. Let's be clear about that. But I mean, he was an alternative to the status quo, and sometimes people win that way. Kenzie, for instance, I would say was an alternative to the status quo, and she won that way. But I mean, it's hard to do, because usually if it's super obvious that you're the only person who stands in the way of one of these other people winning, usually you get voted out, like Steven did. So there you go.
Yeah,
but
doesn't usually get there.
Yeah. Some other things this episode that I was thinking about. This is one small thing, but I mean, it dictated the entire episode, which is the challenge we had, which was yet another balance a thing on a thing, which I feel like this is like the third or fourth straight immunity challenge like that. I don't know if it's actually true. I don't mind these challenges, to be clear. I think that in fact they're the most interesting challenges in terms from like a seeing people drop out gradually. I think it's more interesting to watch than an obstacle course in a puzzle, at least to me. Um, that being said, as soon as I saw this, I was like, okay, Savannah's going to win it, you know, and I don't know what to think about that, because it's like Sage gave it her best effort. She did a good job. Shouts out to her. But at the end of the day, it was like Savannah was at the end of the challenge. Sage literally had to plead with Savannah to please let her win this. Like that says something. Whether that says, that's sad and depressing, or if it says, the challenges need to change or whatever, I don't really know. But it was notable to me for sure that that even happened in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the exact same thing when I saw it. It was like and I didn't watch most of it. I kind of did the 15-second, 30-second flash forward, see who's dropping out, and it was just kind of exactly what you expect.
Yeah.
So I didn't really feel the need to go back and watch the full thing, but I did see Sage talking to Savannah, like you said, and I think there's a mix of it's good work on Savannah's part, getting out people that might have been a threat to her in this type of challenge. No one else was able to compete on her level in that regard. Bad work, I guess, by Survivor for having so many of these to begin with. But maybe who are they to know that this was going to be
Sure
only Savannah with the ability to win these at the end. That is part of the game, is getting yourself to a position where you are the person most likely to win. But Sage trying to tell Savannah to drop and that she was safe was also another questionable decision from Sage on my part. Not just because it seemed a little I'm not even sure what the word is, but just like you have no control over the situation and you just
desperate.
but also be a little desperate. That's exactly right. Seem desperate. So now you're telling Savannah that you're desperate. That's something she'll use against you. She wins anyway. Also, you're lying. You're definitely voting her out. 100% you're voting her out. Because yeah, so it just seemed unnecessary from that regard because it was such an obvious lie.
I love the alternative universe where Savannah, for whatever reason, is like, yeah, sure, you can have immunity, because Sage has just said to her, "I'll do whatever I can to stop you. You're not going home as long as it's up to me." Meanwhile, Sage hasn't had control of a vote in how many episodes? Her number one just got voted out, like, or blindsided even. It's like she doesn't have any power in the game. She has as much power as Christina has. Like it's basically none. Like it's not up to her. It's up to Soph and Rizzo. And yeah, they're probably not going to let Savannah go home, but that's not something you can take credit for.
The only thing I can think is that because everybody knew Steven had this advantage as well, maybe there was talk about, well, they're like trying to project that they have the upper hand no matter what. So Savannah will make sure that it's not you, it'll be Sophie. But even from that perspective, it's still a lie. You're still voting out Savannah there, and Savannah knows she's a bigger threat than Sophie, and there's no chance you're going to be able to, even if Sage was being genuine, there's no chance Sage is able to convince Steven and Christina that it's right to go after Sophie and not Savannah.
Yeah. Or there's the alternative world where, for whatever reason, Sage, which wouldn't be the first time this happened this season, doesn't want to get rid of Savannah. She wants to keep Savannah in the game for who knows what reason, because that happened like the other episode where she was like, where Savannah had lost immunity and, vulnerable. And then she was like, well, we got to take out one of the other people. I think that was the episode Sophie with an E went home.
Right.
Was we have to do this unanimous vote on Sophie right now, because I mean, now's not the right time, which is just it's a little
Sage's whole thing for so long was getting rid of Savannah, and that she had an opportunity and she didn't do it.
Yeah. It's also interesting because that was a consensus vote. The vote against Alex was a consensus vote. this past vote was a consensus vote against Steven. And I mean, I said this, a few episodes ago when Sophie with an E went home, but it's important to reiterate is like the person who is benefiting the most from that is Rizzo. Rizzo is benefiting from that bar none because he's the guy with the idol. And every time you vote out somebody unanimously, that's one more episode he gets without having to even think about playing his idol. Sure, obviously they could all be fooling him and blindsiding him, but the more unanimous votes you have, the more votes you need, and the more you probably need one of his number one allies to blindside him to being Soph or Savannah. And it just doesn't feel like that's happening. It certainly isn't happening anymore, but it never felt like it was happening. So, there you go. But it puts me in a perspective where I see Christina and Sage, popping off for blindsiding Steven, and I'm like, what are you popping off for? You're next. Like, you have played yourself into a corner. Like, especially Sage in this case, where she was, in her confessionals being like, I'm a mean girl too, and I have the power now. I can bite back or whatever else. And here she is, completely vulnerable, completely powerless, basically through her own doing. So
yeah. And the way she stood up at the end after the votes had been read to say to Steven, I can't beat you, so I had to do this. Really, like, trying to take that full credit for the move.
Yeah.
I guess in a similar. Oh no, she's probably genuine about it. I don't know that she's thinking about the game from the points perspective in the way that we think Rizzo kind of is, but it's still a similar kind of thing. I'm trying to take credit for this decision. I made this active decision, and you're going to the jury now. But it's a much different situation when the people don't respect the move, which I think that in this case they probably don't. The lines were drawn, and now you just kind of flipped them.
I think it says something about the move when the jury had the same reaction that I did, which is what happens here, where Steven once again had this big play. You have okay. Let me back up and let's talk about the whole situation with Soph using this advantage, because it isn't just the fact that she uses the advantage on Steven. It's the way she does it, because she pulls out the knowledge is power and is like, I've been holding on to this for a long time, and now's the time to make a move. I'm not going to sit myself. I'm not going to be backed into a corner. I have to make a decision, and I have to do this. And so I'm sorry, Steven, but I'm taking your advantage. And it's like, whoa, she's doing it. And then it doesn't work. And it's like, oh my God, Sophie just swung and missed. She swung for the fences. This was going to change the game. And now in this pivotal vote here at Final Six, she's vulnerable now. And she thought that she was going to be good. And Steven said no. And then Steven gets unanimously voted out anyway. And you could see on the jury's face, it was like, well, what was that for?
Yeah.
Which I think is sort of what the audience collectively asked themselves as well. But I don't know. I think the jury at the end of the day is right about what the gameplay should be, because they're the ones deciding where the $1 million goes. And if Sage or Christina make the end, I doubt either of them are getting a vote. I think they're just getting like questions of, what did you do in this game? And when Christina responds playing the idol for Steven, or when Sage responds getting out Nate, they're going to be like, okay, but like, what did you do? So.
Who does win if it's Sage, Christina, Sophie?
It's a great question.
Likely, but who wins that one? Is it Sophie? Because she had the most allies on the jury, so she probably gets Nate, Rizzo, Savannah to start.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how many people were on the jury this season, but she has those three and Alex on lock immediately.
You think she's got Alex?
I think Alex, through the very notion of,
there were,
we were together. We went through the grind of seeing a guy get bitten by a snake. I think,
and he doesn't really have a connection to Sage or Christina, not a strong one for any reasons. That's probably true. And then maybe Yellow Sophie. Yeah. Sophie probably is a Savannah over, or Sophie over the other two.
Sophie for Soph, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Even in this situation of 3, I'd be surprised if anybody votes Christina. Like, I guess it would be Steven maybe, but I think he knows
I
better
think
than
he's
that.
released from that obligation by the fact that she turned on him.
Also, that
Yeah.
that's a great point. Yeah. Um, and Sage, I mean, I guess Jawan would vote for her for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but beyond that, I really don't know. Everything else would have to come down to who can pitch their game better. And if nothing else, Soph has the strong underdog story. Sage also has an underdog story, comma, at this point, but once again, purely self-inflicted. Um, Sophie, it's like it was inflicted partially by a snake, so it wasn't really her fault. That she was on the bottom going into the merge. But yeah, I don't know. I think it would be Sophie, but I think if nothing else, it'd be interesting because it wouldn't be any of the front runners. It'd be like a 43 thing where we're like, well, what's really going to happen? Jesse's not here, so Carla's not here, Cody's not here. What? Huh? Who's winning?
Yeah,
you know?
for real.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are heading to that stage, so I may as well ask. Like, we're here. We got a finale episode left. Final 5. Give me your predictions. Give me the breakdown of what you think is going to happen throughout the rest of this game. Who wins immunity final 5? Who goes home? Tell me.
I'm going to say Savannah wins Final 5 immunity. And Christina goes home.
Really? Okay.
All
right.
And then I'll say Savannah wins Final 4 immunity.
All right. Fair enough assumption. Yeah.
Boring, but yeah. Takes Rizo.
Okay.
I'll say I have no idea how good anyone on this cast might be at making fire. No
It's
one
true.
seems like they're the I've been practicing fire forever person.
Yeah.
So I'll say Sage beats Sophie in the final 4 fire making, and it ends up being Savannah, Rizo, Sage.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I'm going to make that prediction is a little edit based on things that we've seen for Sage that feel like they haven't quite finalized yet. And maybe it'll be as simple as Sage goes home at Savannah's hand and never got her out, even though she was saying she needed to and didn't take the shot. But I could also see that being a final tribal council story of Sage is in there trying to pitch herself. But the case against Sage is you were pitching yourself as an opposition to Savannah, but when you had that chance, you didn't take it. And so the votes go to Savannah there. But I could certainly just as easily see it being just the 3 of Savannah, Rizo, Sophie.
Yeah. And then what's the vote breakdown there? Like, I assume Savannah's going to win, but
that's a good question. Definitely Savannah is my winner pick. I'm going to say I think the obvious votes for her are Nate and Sophie. So we've got, who do we have on the jury? Nate, MC.
Let me see if I can get the people up.
Alex.
Yeah, so the jury is Nate, MC, Alex, Jawan, Sophie, and then in your theoretical world, it would be Christina, Sophie, and of course Steven.
Christina, Sophie, Steven. Okay. I think Nate and Sophie are locks for Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
Jawan is a lock for Sage.
Yeah.
Alex, Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
Sophie, other Sophie, also Savannah.
I agree with that.
4 Savannah already. Steven. I could go either way between Savannah or Riza there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I yeah. I
Christina
think
probably go Sage.
uh yeah, I think Christina would go Sage. I think either that or Savannah, but I feel
Yeah.
like there's a little bit of truth in every bit or whatever. And I think that like she would rather vote for Sage and rather see her win than Savannah. So that's
Yeah.
just kind of my guess. But
They
yeah.
seem friends and they still voted together here. If Christina goes out, it won't be because Sage voted against her. So I'll say it'll be Nate, MC, Alex, Sophie, and Sophie voting for Savannah. Savannah wins with 5 votes. Sage gets Jawan and Christina. And just for fun, Rizzo gets Steven's vote. So Rizzo isn't a 0 vote finalist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
I
think Rizzo
honestly
deserves votes. So, but I think that Savannah is probably pulling them.
I will say to speak on that, like that's one thing that really hurts Rizzo's game is that he's basically played, even though he has his idol, he's basically played the exact same game as Savannah. So there's nothing to diversify his survivor portfolio at the end. So if he sits next to her, she's probably going to win. And it could be a situation where it's almost like an Eva Joe situation once again, where it's like one of them gets all the votes and the other person doesn't, or like a Yam Yam Carolyn thing, where it's like one of them gets all the votes and one of them doesn't, even though they were basically equals throughout the game.
Do you think he realizes this at all? Do you think it's in his head? We've heard nothing about it, seemingly in confessionals, that she might be a threat to beat him. He talks about them as a group, though. You also, I don't think, ever really hear him talking about himself as the obvious favorite, but it does seem like he probably thinks that if he's at the end with them, he's winning because of all of the technical things that he's done in the game. And
it's
well.
It's a good question. I think the one thing that I know about the Riz God RIZGOD baby is he's not lacking in confidence. And I think that, like, from his perspective, if I had to guess what he thinks about his own gameplay, I think he thinks he's Rick Devens. I think he thinks he's Tony or someone like that who is just messing with people's heads, playing a maybe more of a Tony in the playing. People are still coming to me talking to me about the vote, and I'm playing these advantages and I'm making things theatrical, and it's like, but it's like I'm doing it for a gameplay purpose, and I'm getting further, and it's like it's not all just for television though. A lot of it's for television. It's like it's advancing myself further in the game. I think he thinks that like he maybe isn't a lot to win at the end, but it's like his case is very, very strong when I think it's a lot weaker than it feels like it should be, or maybe not even that it should be. It feels weaker than it than it looks on paper. Like it looks, if you see somebody on Survivor who's, getting up and standing up and being like, that was my move, bro, or whatever else, and being like, I think I'll not use the idol today, or giving a fake for whatever reason. I think theoretically you'd be like, oh wow, that's a good gameplay player, or that's an all-time game player because he's still around. But I think a lot of it is just kind of like a collective shrug from people, and it's like, okay, but like Savannah's our priority, and that's sort of been the status quo for the entire season. And I don't really think he realizes that he is the second threat. He's not the first threat. And I think you can tell that because there hasn't been one single confessional where he's even said, yeah, now might be the time to get rid of Savannah. Not once. So
Yeah.
yeah. To speak on what I predict to happen throughout the rest of this game, I am going to go a little different from you. I think that, well, I won't go different in this sense. I think Savannah wins the next immunity challenge, but honestly, I don't think it matters if she wins or not. Like if Sophie pulls it out or if Rizzo pulls it out, I think it's the same, which is you wanted to get your information about, hey, how do we wrap up all these things about Sage? We get basically things are happening. Yeah. Things are happening in the sense of I feel like this final five vote is going to be way more boring than it should be. I think Savannah's going to win immunity. Rizzo's going to play the idol on himself, and then that leaves Sophie, Christina, Sage. And I think at that point, Sophie's definitely going to vote with Savannah and Rizzo. So really, Sophie's not an option to be taken out. So it's Christina or Sage. They're going to vote for each other. And we're going to get sort of a consensus like, Sage, you played a great game. You got all the way here. Shouts out to you. Talk about your survivor journey. Basically, what happened with Mitch last season. I think that's what we're going to get for Sage, which isn't very exciting, but I think that's how it goes. So, yeah. I don't like saying that because I feel like I'm going to curse that into the world, and then we're all going to be, wasting an hour of our time at the start of, or 40 minutes of our time at the start of the finale episode. But
that's what the first 40 minutes are for.
Exactly. So that's what I think. And then going down to fire making, I don't necessarily assume Savannah's going to win because it's going to be a different type of challenge than it is normally that we've seen. It's not going to be a balancing challenge. It's probably going to be some motion again or something like it. And I think those are ones that I think Rizzo could win that. I think Rizzo could win that. So I'm going to say that just to be fun. Rizzo wins. He's going to win an immunity challenge. It's going to be final immunity. It's going to be like a great job. Rizzo, you did it.
It's the coordination god.
Yeah. He's going to be, and he is not going to put himself in fire. I think he's going to put, man, I could see a world where he takes Christina to the end because he's not going to do that. He's going to take Savannah to the end. What am I saying? I think regardless whether it's Savannah wins or Rizzo wins, they take each other, and then it's Sophie versus Christina at the end. But you know what? It's a 50-50. We don't know how they do in fire making. So I'm gonna say Christina wins. Just for fun. She's gonna inexplicably be sitting at the end because I think it would be kind of funny if she had to answer questions about her own game of Final Tribal Council. So I'm gonna say that. And also Sophie, there's no reason for this, but she gives me the vibes of a fallen angel. Like I could see Jeff once again, sort of like how I predict he'll be doing with Sage, being like, Sophie, you played a great game. How does the survivor journey feel when you got so close, but you couldn't get it? Like I can see it. You were on the bottom. Yeah, you were at the tribe of two. I could totally see it. And then Christine is just there at the end, sort of like Heidi in past seasons, or Romeo or other people in the new era, where it's like, hey, I don't know how you got here, but you're here, and we're not going to give you a vote. But I'm glad that you came out. So that's my prediction for what happens. And then in terms of vote breakdown, I think Savannah would win. Well, Christina would get no votes. I think in this situation, I'll give Steven giving it to Rizzo. I'll give that up. Maybe beyond that, maybe that's it. I mean, no, Sage is also going to vote Rizzo. Sage is going to vote Rizzo. So I think everybody else votes Savannah though. So that'd be what, 6-2, 5-2, something like that.
6-2, I think.
Yeah. 6-2-0. That's my prediction. So there you go.
Nice. We love it. That would be, I could definitely see both of those endings for Sage and Sophie with Jeff going exactly that way. If it is that, he'll definitely make a meal out of it.
I was kind of BSing my way through what my predictions were, but I think I convinced myself that Sage thing is going to happen. Yeah. I convinced myself that we're going to have a rather uneventful 40 minutes next Wednesday. But we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong, but
even if she isn't voted out or lose fire, that will certainly be brought up at the reunion or whatever it is that they do, the after party.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one thing that we agree on is that at Final Five, the idol isn't going to be used in an interesting way. It's going to be played. Rizzo's going to play for himself. The most insane thing I could see him doing is keeping it as a souvenir. but he still wouldn't be voted out. Like I could see him doing that
I could too.
for theatrics, and then the jury just really being over it at that point. I could see that. Yeah, but yeah, I don't think
well,
so.
it is like Rizzo helpfully told us at Tribal Council that the side that comes out of on top of this vote is going to control the rest of the game, however long that ends up being. It's true. Yes, at the final six, the group of three that comes out on top will control the final 5 vote.
And when you're right, you're right.
Yeah.
All right, so we both predict that Savannah is going to win. We both predicted that Rizzo is going to be there in some capacity. So there you go. We'll be here for the finale. It'll be great, and we'll watch it. But I don't think it's setting up for the most interesting finish, except in the event that I guess Christina wins final immunity and sends Savannah into fire making, but or Sage wins, I guess, depending if she's still there or not. But that would actually be that would really be a great narrative if Sage wins final immunity and puts Savannah in fire, or puts herself in fire against Savannah and wins or loses. That would be pretty great. I'm manifesting that. Yeah, I'm manifesting that.
That would be an interesting finale. I think that's the most interesting we could hope for.
All right. Well, let's hope for interesting. Anything else in your mind today, JFK?
I don't think so. I think that covers it for me. We'll wait and see who actually does end up winning. If it is Savannah, I think she will be an interesting winner to talk about from the perspective of where does she rank amongst the winners, even in a season that isn't necessarily thought of as the best. I think she would be a pretty strong winner with some very solid fundamentals of the game, having been able to work herself from the bottom back up to the top, and with the help of advantages. But that's the game. She used the game mechanics definitely to her advantage, in addition to, I think, a pretty strong social game. So if she does win, that'll be interesting to hear what people think about her game overall. And if it's not her, I will love to see how we get there, and then what people think of whoever that winner ends up being.
Yeah. I kind of disagree with you in the sense I didn't necessarily think Savannah would be the strongest winner, but I think a lot of that comes down to how big are the smiles on people's faces when they see her at Final Tribal Council, if she is indeed there. Like, how happy do they seem to be giving her $1 million? Because from my perspective, I feel like half the people on the jury are looking for somebody to vote for. There's no obvious person for them to vote for. A lot of it feels like an obligation, like we were talking about. Like, well, it's Rizzo or Savannah because there are no other options. There's no Steven anymore. And maybe that speaks to better gameplay for Savannah. Maybe that makes her go into a higher echelon than she would otherwise be. Or maybe that makes her go into a lower echelon where it's like, would she still win if Steven was there? I don't know. Or if Sophie with she would win if Sophie with New was there. But MC was there or somebody like that. I don't know. It's hard to say.
When I say pretty strong, I also think I mean like 20 to 30, not 30 to 49. We got 49 of these winners at this point. So pretty strong is still 20th best at best.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you so much, JFK, for joining. We'll be back for the finale episode with somebody. We'll figure out who. And I appreciate you so much for joining, JFK. This is great. And thank you for watching and listening. And have a great one, everybody.
Thank you.